Okay. So I'm here with Sasha Pailet Koff, who I've now known for about 4 years, and who is a thought leader in the supply chain space. We met when you were working at Johnson Johnson as a supply chain leader. You went on to lead digital supply chain at Dell, and now you have your own consulting firm, and you're advising those types of large enterprises on how they think about supply chain.
Yes.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
What level of seniority is the right level of seniority? What should founders sort of look for in terms of the sponsor?
So I think it's a depends question, right? I think it really depends on the type of technology they're looking for. Certainly you want a sponsor within the organization that's going to have enough clout, that's going to be able to take a risk on you and understand the difference of a failure around a missed timeline versus a failure around it's the right idea and we've got to take a pivot and maybe we need another go at the wheel.
Yep.
So I think it's got to be somebody senior enough in the organization that really understands just what the life cycle of software development looks like versus somebody who's just a purchaser. Now that could be a director that has budget and is able to invest in the organization, or it could require all the way up to the CEO. So I think the question that a founder needs to be asking as they're thinking about these organizations of where's the right call point is, does the person that I'm working with truly understand the software agile lifecycle process, number one. Number two, do they actually have control enough over the budget, not just to pay for what I want now, but do they have enough control and authority over the budget for the next 2 to 3 years?
Oh, interesting.
Right?
Okay.
So, and depending on the organization and depending on where in the organization, those two questions may be far down in the organization or it could be all the way up in the organization. But those are the two questions that I would say at some point earlier on in the conversation needs to be vetted, right?
Yes.
You need to have an understanding of that person's knowledge around the life cycle process. And you also have to have an appreciation for that person's budget control.
Yes.
Around the process.
That's really helpful. And kind of like making it personal, when you were like at Dell, you were senior, were you the right point of initial contact or was it somebody on your team who sort of worked for you? How did you think about that?
So look, I mean, again, right, it depended. And the same thing at J&J. It depended on what we were trying to solve. In some cases, I was really a pass-through to a leader that I knew had that need. And it was more of a brokering relationship of, hey, here's the person you need to work with. This is really going to be your buyer and being really explicit about it. In other cases, it was really more of, I'll say, an R&D perspective of, look, we've got this hypothesis. We've got another team that's working on it too. And I was trying to prove out who could actually move it faster along. So in those cases, right, typically what we see in larger organizations is a development team that is doing kind of R&D type of work and has a budget to experiment. But I would say the piece back to that question of, well, who's got the budget for the longer term? I never did that without a solid understanding of, okay, but who in the business is ultimately going to own the budget for investing in this capability before we would start to experiment. And I was really clear with the startups of what that looked like. And I think that's where some, I'll say, mismatch of understanding is the organization might get plugged into what I'll call kind of the kind of innovation team at a company. But the innovation team is so disjointed from the actual user community that they just end up in the R&D cycle. They never get over into the operational cycle. So while they may have the short-term budget, they may not have, and that's why I went back and I said to you, like, who's going to own the budget 2 to 3 years from now, not just through the kind of initial phase of work is so critically important, because you want to make sure that even in that R&D phase, even if it's just in that innovation team, there is a line of sight and you're already building a relationship with who the user of that solution is going to be.
Right. So even if it's a pilot, there's like an ability to actually renew that for the following year. And you know, a lot of our startups do run into innovation groups. And it is attractive because there's like an opportunity to sign a deal up front. But you're right, a lot of those don't seem to convert into like full-on contracts. So that's really good advice.
So that would be.